What life lessons have you learned from watching family dynamics? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories about courage, family, and finding your voice at any age. The Arizona sunrise painted the sky in shades of coral and gold as I sat on the edge of my bed, gathering strength for another day. At 71, my bones protested every morning movement. But my mind remained sharp, despite what my daughter-in-law Cassandra might suggest to anyone who had listened. The irony wasn't lost on me that in my own home I would become the unwelcome guest. My bedroom window faced east toward the Superstition Mountains, their jagged peaks catching the first light. Phoenix was waking up around me in our quiet neighborhood of Desert Ridge, where I had lived for 43 years. Back when Harold and I first bought this ranch-style house in 1981, the area was mostly desert and dreams. Now it was filled with strip malls and traffic, but the memories remained embedded in every room. I shuffled to the kitchen, my arthritis reminding me of my age with each step. The house felt too large and too small simultaneously, too large for one elderly woman, yet too cramped for the 5 people now living under its roof. The morning ritual of making coffee had become a minefield of unspoken rules about whose cream I could use, and which mug belonged to whom. "Morning, Grandma Violet," came a sleepy voice from the kitchen doorway. My youngest grandson Marcus stood there, 16 and all elbows and knees, his sandy hair sticking up in every direction. Unlike his older sister, he still spoke to me with genuine warmth, though I noticed how quickly he would grab his breakfast and disappear to avoid the inevitable tension. "Good morning, sweetheart," I smiled, reaching for the pancake mix. "Saturday pancakes?" He nodded, enthusiastically, sliding into the breakfast nook that Harold had built with his own hands decades ago. The custom bench seating had been my pride and joy once upon a time, where we had hosted countless family breakfasts, filled with laughter and planning for the future. "Where is everyone?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Saturday mornings followed the same pattern now. Mom's getting ready for some work thing. Dad's still asleep. Jessica's at swim practice. Marcus pulled out his phone, already half retreating into his digital world. I mixed the batter in silence, remembering when Saturday mornings meant family time together, not strategic avoidance of each other's company. The sizzle of the first pancake on the griddle was interrupted by the sharp click of heels on tile. "Violet, did you use my vanilla creamer again?" Cassandra appeared in the doorway, immaculate despite the early hour. At 42, she maintained herself like a woman half her age, all sharp angles and perfectly applied makeup. Her auburn hair was pulled into a severe bun that seemed to stretch her features taut. "I used my usual coffee mate," I replied carefully, flipping the pancake, the store brand, from the side door. "That is not what I am talking about." She opened the refrigerator with unnecessary force. "The French vanilla one I specifically asked you not to touch. It is expensive, and I only buy it for special occasions." I hadn't touched her creamer. I had been buying my own groceries separately for 2 years now, ever since the great yogurt incident when I had eaten a container that apparently belonged to her meal prep routine. But arguing would only create more tension, and Marcus was listening to every word. "I apologize, Cassandra. I will replace it today." She studied me with those calculating gray eyes that never seemed to warm, even when she smiled. "It is not about the money, Violet. It is about boundaries. Everyone needs to respect personal property." Personal property in my own kitchen, where I had prepared thousands of meals over 4 decades, where Harold and I had shared quiet morning coffees and planned our son David's future, where I would taught my grandchildren to bake cookies and roll pie dough. But now I needed permission to use creamer. "Of course," I agreed quietly, plating Marcus's pancakes. "I understand completely." Cassandra poured herself coffee, using her precious creamer with deliberate emphasis, then swept out of the kitchen to continue her morning preparations. The silence that followed felt heavy and awkward. "Grandma, you didn't use her creamer, did you?" Marcus whispered, glancing toward the hallway. I shook my head slightly, placing syrup and butter before him. Sometimes it is easier to apologize than argue. Sweetie, he frowned, looking older than his 16 years. That is not fair. Life rarely is, I said, settling beside him with my own plain black coffee. But we choose our battles carefully. My son David emerged from the master bedroom just as I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes. At 45, he had inherited his father's gentle brown eyes and steady demeanor. But somewhere along the way, he had lost Harold's backbone. The man who used to stand up to playground bullies for other kids now couldn't stand up to his own wife for his mother. "Morning, Mom," he yawned, scratching his graying beard. "Pancakes smell great. There are extras in the warming oven," I said, watching him pour coffee into his favorite mug one I had given him. For Father's Day 15 years ago, some things remained unchanged. "Thanks. You are a lifesaver." He sat heavily at the counter, and I noticed the stress lines around his eyes had deepened recently. His job as an insurance adjuster had become increasingly demanding, or perhaps home life made work feel like an escape. "How is the Peterson claim coming along?" I asked, remembering he had mentioned a particularly difficult case involving storm damage, complex. The homeowners trying to inflate damages, the insurance companies trying to minimize them, and I am stuck in the middle trying to find the truth. He shook his head. "Sometimes I wonder why I didn't become a teacher like I originally planned. Because Cassandra had convinced him insurance offered better money and security," I remembered. Every major life decision for the past 18 years had been filtered through her ambitions and fears, including the decision to move into my house, temporarily 4 years ago, after David's car accident left him unable to work for 8 months. "Teaching's still an option," I suggested gently. "It is never too late to follow your dreams." He smiled sadly. "At 45, with 2 kids and a mortgage, dreams are a luxury I cannot afford anymore." Mom, mortgage. The word stung because there wasn't one. Harold and I had paid off this house in 2003, 2 years before his heart attack took him suddenly at age 68. David knew this house was mine, free and clear, but somehow Cassandra had convinced him they were contributing to household expenses when they paid only utilities and groceries. "David, we need to discuss something important," Cassandra announced, returning to the kitchen with a tablet in her hands. "I have been offered a promotion to regional sales manager." My son straightened, looking genuinely pleased. "Cass, that is fantastic news. When did you hear?" "Yesterday afternoon." She scrolled through something on her screen. "The salary increase is substantial. But there is one requirement. I will need to work from home 3 days a week, conducting video conferences with clients across the Southwest region." A familiar knot formed in my stomach. Whenever Cassandra announced changes, they somehow involved reducing my space or increasing my inconvenience. "That is wonderful," David said. "You can set up an office in the spare room." "The spare room will not work." She shook her head. "I need somewhere with excellent lighting, minimal noise, and professional appearance for video calls. I have been thinking about the sunroom." My sunroom, the bright, plant-filled space where I had cultivated my greenhouse collection for 30 years, where I propagated seedlings, tended my orchid collection, and found peace during Harold's illness, and after his death. The room that faced the mountain view and caught morning light through floor to ceiling windows. The sunroom. I tried to keep my voice steady, but that is where all my plants are. "Plants can be moved," Cassandra said dismissively. "Or simplified. Let's be honest, Violet. You have far too many for a person your age to properly maintain. Most of them are looking rather peaked anyway." My plants were thriving. I spent hours each day caring for them, checking soil moisture, adjusting their positions for optimal light, talking to them the way Harold used to tease me about. They were my connection to life, growth, and beauty in a house that had become increasingly cold and unwelcoming. "Where would I move them?" I asked. "The back porch has good light, or we could donate some to the community center. I am sure they would appreciate them." She spoke as if we were discussing old furniture rather than living things I had nurtured for decades. "Mom, what do you think?" David asked. Though I could see he had already made up his mind, he always deferred to Cassandra on domestic decisions, treating her as the practical one while dismissing my concerns as sentimental. "I think it is a big change," I said carefully. "The sunroom is my retreat. It is where I go to find peace." "You can find peace in your bedroom," Cassandra replied. "Or the living room. The sunroom is wasted space for one person's hobby when it could generate income for the whole family." Hobby: 30 years of cultivating beauty, learning about botanical care, creating a living sanctuary reduced to a hobby that was less important than her video conferences. "When would this transition happen?" I asked. "The new position starts Monday. I would like to begin setting up the office this weekend." She had already decided, of course. My opinion was merely a formality. I looked at David, hoping to see some recognition of what she was asking, some acknowledgement that this was my home and my sunroom. Instead, I saw the same passive acceptance that had characterized his response to every one of her demands over the years. "We will work something out, Mom," he said vaguely. "Maybe this is a good time to simplify anyway. You have been saying the maintenance is getting harder." I had never said that. I had mentioned my arthritis made repotting more challenging, but I had never expressed any desire to give up my plants. Yet somehow my words had been twisted to support their narrative. "I suppose I don't have much choice," I said quietly. "Of course you have a choice." Cassandra's voice carried false sweetness. "You can choose to support what is best for the family, or you can choose to be difficult about it." The ultimatum was clear: agree gracefully, or be labeled as the obstinate old woman causing problems for everyone. I had faced this choice countless times over the past 4 years, and I had always chosen family harmony over personal dignity. "I will start moving the plants this afternoon," I conceded. "Wonderful." Cassandra's smile never reached her eyes. "I will order the office furniture today, so it can be delivered Monday." She had already ordered it, I realized. This conversation was theater, designed to make me feel like I had participated in the decision when the outcome was predetermined. After they left for their respective Saturday activities, I stood in my sunroom surrounded by the green life I had cultivated with such love and patience. My prize orchid, a phalaenopsis that Harold had given me for our 25th anniversary, sat blooming magnificently on its special stand. The pothos vine I had grown from a cutting in 1995 cascaded from its hanging basket, so long it nearly touched the floor. Dozens of succulents, herbs, flowering plants, and tropical specimens filled every surface and corner. Each plant held memories. The snake plant that survived Jessica's toddler years, when she had helped by dumping water everywhere. The African violet collection that had been my mother's before she passed. The lemon tree I had grown from seed, that now stood 5 feet tall and actually produced fruit. How do you move a life's work to make room for someone else's ambition? I called my oldest friend, Ruth Martinez, who lived 3 blocks away in the same neighborhood where we had raised our children together. "They want your sunroom." Ruth's voice rose with indignation. "Violet, that is your sanctuary. You spend more time with those plants than most people spend with their family. Cassandra says it is the only suitable space for her video conferences," I explained, already starting to sound defeated to my own ears. "And what did David say? That I should simplify anyway. That the maintenance is getting harder for me." "Is it getting harder?" I considered the question honestly. Some things are more difficult. Lifting heavy pots, reaching high shelves. But I adapt. I use plant caddies and ask Marcus to help with the heavy lifting. The plants bring me joy, Ruth. They are one of the few things I still have control over. Then, don't give them up. If I don't, I will be the difficult one. The unreasonable mother-in-law who puts her hobby before the family's financial future. "Your hobby," Ruth snorted. "Violet, you have turned that sunroom into something magical. People come from all over the neighborhood to see your orchid collection. The county extension office asked you to speak at their gardening seminar. Don't let her minimize what you have accomplished." After we hung up, I sat among my plants feeling more alone than I had since Harold's death. At least then, I had been surrounded by people who understood my grief and supported my healing. Now I was surrounded by people who saw me as an impediment to their progress. The afternoon passed in a blur of careful transplanting and strategic placement. I moved what I could to the back porch. Though the lighting was poor and the afternoon sun too intense, some plants went to my bedroom, though they would struggle without adequate light. The larger specimens had to stay temporarily in the sunroom until I could figure out permanent solutions. By evening, my back ached and my hands were stained with soil, but I had managed to clear enough space for Cassandra's vision of a professional office. The sunroom looked bare and sterile, stripped of the life and color that had made it special. Jessica, my 18-year-old granddaughter, found me sitting on the back porch, among the relocated plants, as the sun began to set. "Grandma the Sea, what happened to the sunroom?" She settled beside me on the porch steps, her long blonde hair catching the last light. Unlike her mother, Jessica had inherited David's gentle nature and Harold's sense of fairness. "Your mom needs it for her office," I explained. "She got promoted to regional manager." Jessica looked around at the crowded porch, taking in the orchids that looked stressed in their new environment and the herbs that were already wilting in the inappropriate light. "But this is your space. You have been working on this collection since I was little. I remember helping you repot plants when I was barely tall enough to reach the tables." "People's needs change," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Your parents need the income from your mother's promotion." "They need a lot of things," Jessica said quietly, "but that doesn't mean they should take yours." That evening, David found me reading in my bedroom, the only space in the house that remained unchanged. He knocked softly and entered with the hesitant expression he wore when he knew he should say something but wasn't sure what. "Mom, I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about the sunroom." I looked up from my book, studying the man who had once been my curious, justice-minded little boy. Did I have a choice? He shifted uncomfortably. "Of course you had a choice. We are not forcing you to do anything, aren't you?" I set the book aside. "David, when was the last time I said no to one of Cassandra's requests?" He thought about it, and I could see him struggling to remember any instance when I would stood my ground. "You are family," he said finally. "We work together to support each other, do we? When have you supported something I wanted?" That Cassandra opposed, the question hung in the air between us. I could see him mentally reviewing years of small conflicts and compromises, searching for a single example where he had chosen my side over hers. "It is not about sides, Mom, isn't it? When I wanted to keep the dining room table that your father built, Cassandra said it didn't match the decor. We donated it to charity. When I wanted to maintain the garden beds out front, she said the maintenance was too expensive, and we should install desert landscaping. When I wanted to continue hosting Christmas dinner, she said it was too much work for someone my age, and we started going to her sisters instead." Each example hit its mark. I could see the recognition in his eyes, though he struggled against it. Those were practical decisions. They were her preferences, and each time I was asked to sacrifice what mattered to me for the greater good. "But David, when has Cassandra ever been asked to sacrifice anything for me?" He couldn't answer, because the answer was never. The flow of accommodation had been entirely one-directional for 4 years. "I love this family," I continued. "I love you and the kids more than my own life. But I am starting to wonder if you see me as a person with my own needs and feelings, or just as a convenient resource to make your lives easier." "Mom, that is not fair." Fair, I felt something crack inside me, like ice beginning to break on a frozen pond. "David, I am 71 years old. I have spent 4 years in my own home feeling like an unwelcome guest. I cook dinners that get criticized for being too salty or too bland. I do laundry that gets re-washed because I didn't use the right detergent. I tiptoe around my own house trying not to disturb anyone or use anything that might belong to someone else. And now I am giving up the one space that brings me peace, so your wife can advance her career. Tell me what is fair about that. He stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. The woman who had raised him alone for 6 months when Harold was deployed overseas early in their marriage. The woman who had worked double shifts as a medical secretary to help pay for his college. The woman who had cared for his father through cancer treatments and then grieved quietly to avoid burdening anyone with her pain. "I didn't realize you felt this way," he said softly. "Because you never asked. You see what is convenient to see and ignore the rest." He sat on the edge of my bed, looking suddenly older than his 45 years. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to remember that this is my home. I want you to consult me before making decisions that affect my life. I want you to consider my needs equally with everyone else's." My voice grew stronger with each demand. "And I want you to stand up for me occasionally, the way I always stood up for you." David nodded slowly, though I suspected nothing would change. He had returned to Cassandra and explained my concerns. She would provide reasonable-sounding counterarguments, and he would convince himself that maintaining peace was more important than maintaining justice. "I will talk to Cass," he promised. "Will you? Or will you tell her I am having a hard time adjusting and ask her to be patient with me?" His wince told me I had guessed correctly. After he left, I sat in my bedroom surrounded by the displaced plants that were already beginning to droop in the poor light. Tomorrow I would have to watch as furniture arrived to transform my sanctuary into Cassandra's professional space. I would have to smile and act supportive while everything I had built was dismantled. But something had shifted during my conversation with David. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth clearly and without apology. I had named the pattern of accommodation and sacrifice that had defined my life in this house. And while I didn't expect immediate change, I felt something stirring inside me, a whisper of the strong woman I used to be. Monday morning arrived with characteristic Arizona brightness, the sun already warming the mountains by 6 a.m. I had always been an early riser, but lately I woke up even earlier, as if my subconscious was trying to claim a few peaceful moments before the day's demands began. The office furniture had arrived as promised, transforming my sunroom into a sterile workspace with a large desk, ergonomic chair, and professional lighting setup. Cassandra had added personal touches, framed certificates, a motivational poster about success, and artificial plants that required no care or attention. "It looks very professional," I told her truthfully, as she adjusted her new computer monitor. "Thank you." She seemed genuinely pleased. "The lighting is perfect for video calls, and the mountain view provides an impressive background for clients." My mountain view, the vista I had enjoyed every morning for 30 years while tending my plants and drinking coffee. Now it would serve as a backdrop for sales presentations. "I am sorry about your plants," she added, though her tone suggested she was saying what she thought. I wanted to hear rather than expressing genuine remorse. Maybe this is an opportunity to try something new. Something new. At 71, apparently I needed new hobbies to replace the ones that had brought me decades of joy. The next few days established a new routine. Cassandra claimed the sunroom from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., conducting calls that could be heard throughout the house, despite the closed doors. Her voice carried an artificial enthusiasm that grated on my nerves as she discussed quarterly projections and market penetration strategies. My displaced plants struggled in their new locations. The orchids, accustomed to filtered sunlight and consistent humidity, began showing stress signs on the back porch, where afternoon temperatures soared above 100 degrees. The herbs wilted in my bedroom where windows faced north and provided insufficient light. Even the hardy succulents seemed confused by their cramped quarters. "Grandma the sick. Your lemon tree doesn't look good," Marcus observed one evening, finding me on the back porch trying to provide extra water and shade for my struggling collection. He was right. The 5-foot tree that had been my pride and joy was dropping leaves at an alarming rate, stressed by the move and inadequate growing conditions. "Plants are resilient," I said, though I didn't believe it. "They will adapt. Will they? Or will they die?" His question was more perceptive than I had expected from a 16-year-old. and it forced me to confront what I had been avoiding. My plants weren't adapting, they were slowly dying, and I was watching it happen, telling myself it was necessary for the greater good. Some might not survive, I admitted. That seems wrong, he said simply. That evening, I called Ruth again, needing to voice my growing frustration to someone who might understand. "How are the plants doing?" she asked immediately. "Not well. The orchids are dropping buds, the lemon tree is losing leaves, and the African violets haven't bloomed since the move." "And how are you doing?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on my plants' welfare that I hadn't examined my own emotional state. "I am fine," I said automatically. "Violet Elena Santos." Ruth used my full name the way she had when we were young mothers, and she was calling me out on something. "Don't lie to me. I have known you for 43 years, I sighed. Settling into my bedroom chair surrounded by wilting plants, I feel like I am disappearing. Like every part of me that made me who I am is being slowly erased for other people's convenience. Then stop letting it happen. It is not that simple, Ruth. This is my family. If I make waves, if I become difficult, they might decide I am too much trouble and move out. And would that be such a terrible thing?" The question shocked me into silence. Would it be terrible to live alone in my own house again? To make my own decisions about how to spend my time and space? To eat what I wanted? Watch what I wanted? Use whatever creamer I pleased? "I would be alone," I said finally. "You are alone now," Ruth pointed out. "The only difference is that now you are alone in a house full of people who treat you like hired help." Her words stung because they contained too much truth. I was alone in ways that went deeper than physical solitude, alone with my feelings, alone with my needs, alone with my dreams for how my golden years might have unfolded differently. After we hung up, I sat in my bedroom looking at the photographs on my dresser. Harold and me on our wedding day, both so young and full of hope. David's graduation from college, where he had thanked me in his speech for believing in him when he didn't believe in himself. The grandchildren as babies, toddlers, children, and teenagers, each stage documented with love and pride. When had I stopped being the center of my own story and become just a supporting character in everyone else's? The answer came to me gradually, as I traced through the years since Harold's death. Initially, I had been the grieving widow deserving of support and consideration. Then I had been the helpful grandmother providing free childcare and home-cooked meals. Slowly, I would become the aging relative who needed to be managed and accommodated rather than consulted and respected. But I was still the same woman who had worked full-time while raising a child, who had managed household finances and medical crises, who had made countless difficult decisions with wisdom and grace. When had everyone stopped seeing me as capable and started seeing me as a burden? 2 weeks after Cassandra's office transformation, I received a phone call that changed everything. "Mrs. Santos, this is Jennifer Walsh from the County Extension Office. I hope you remember me from the gardening seminar last spring." I did remember, a young woman, enthusiastic about botanical education, who had been impressed by my orchid collection and asked thoughtful questions about cultivation techniques. "Of course, Jennifer, how can I help you?" "I am calling with an exciting opportunity. The Phoenix Botanical Garden is planning a special exhibit on home orchid cultivation, and several people recommended you as someone who might contribute specimens. Would you be interested in participating?" My heart leaped. The Phoenix Botanical Garden was a prestigious institution, and being asked to contribute to an exhibit was a significant honor in the local gardening community. "I am very flattered," I began, "but I am not sure my collection is exhibition ready right now. I have recently had to relocate my plants, and they are still adjusting. Could I come see them anyway?" Sometimes, plants photograph beautifully even when they are not in perfect condition. And we are particularly interested in mature specimens with interesting growth patterns. We scheduled a visit for the following Saturday, and I spent the week trying to nurse my plants back to health with extra attention and care. Several responded positively to the increased watering and fertilizing, but others continued to decline in their inappropriate environments. Jennifer arrived promptly at 10 a.m., an energetic woman in her 30s with dirt under her fingernails and genuine enthusiasm for plant life. She spent over an hour examining my collection, taking notes and photographs, asking detailed questions about growing techniques and plant histories. Mrs. Santos, "This is remarkable," she said, studying my prize orchid that was still managing to bloom, despite the stress of relocation. "How long have you been cultivating this particular specimen?" 28 years, I answered with pride. "It was a gift from my late husband for our anniversary. The root system must be incredible. And this growth pattern, it is exactly what we are looking for to demonstrate long-term home cultivation success." As she continued her examination, I found myself opening up about my passion for botanical care, sharing techniques I had developed over decades and stories about individual plants. It felt wonderful to talk to someone who understood and appreciated the complexity and artistry involved in maintaining a diverse collection. "There is just one concern," Jennifer said, as we concluded the tour. "Several of these specimens are showing stress signs. The lighting conditions aren't optimal, and some seem to be struggling with environmental changes." I explained about the recent relocation, trying to minimize the situation. But Jennifer was too experienced to be fooled. "Mrs. Santos, plants of this caliber need proper growing conditions to thrive. Have you considered setting up a greenhouse or dedicated growing space?" "Space is limited right now," I said diplomatically. She nodded thoughtfully. "I understand family situations can be complicated, but I hope you will consider that these plants represent decades of work and knowledge. They deserve proper care." After she left, I sat among my struggling plants feeling ashamed. Jennifer was right. They deserved better than cramped quarters and inappropriate lighting. They deserved the care and attention I had always provided, before I had allowed other priorities to override their needs. That evening, Cassandra emerged from her office with a satisfied smile, clearly pleased with her day's productivity. "I closed 2 major accounts today," she announced to David as they prepared dinner together. "The home office setup is perfect for video presentations." "That is fantastic." "Honey," David responded with genuine enthusiasm. "The promotion is really paying off." I wanted to feel happy for her success, but all I could think about were my dying plants and the botanical garden opportunity that might be compromised by their poor condition. "Mom, you seem quiet tonight," Jessica observed as we sat down for dinner. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, not wanting to create family tension, but needing to voice my growing concern. "Someone from the Phoenix Botanical Garden visited today," I said. "They are interested in featuring some of my orchids in an upcoming exhibit." "Wow, Grandma the Sea. That is amazing." Jessica lit up with excitement. "Which ones?" "Several, potentially." But she was concerned about their current condition. "They are not thriving in their new locations." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Cassandra continued eating without comment, but I could see David processing the implications of my statement. "Maybe we could find better spots for them," he suggested tentatively. "Where?" I asked directly. "They need specific light conditions, proper humidity, and stable temperatures." The sunroom provided all of that. "The sunroom is my office now," Cassandra said firmly. "I cannot have plants interfering with professional video calls." They wouldn't interfere. They had just be there, like they were for 30 years. "It is different now. I am conducting business with corporate clients who expect a certain level of professionalism, and plants somehow compromise professionalism." I found myself challenging her assumption more directly than usual. "They are distracting, and they require constant maintenance, watering, pruning, repotting. I cannot have that kind of disruption during important calls. I maintained them for 30 years without disrupting anyone. That was different. You weren't sharing the space with someone who had actual work to do." Actual work, the phrase hung in the air like poison, implying that my decades of botanical cultivation had been nothing more than expensive time wasting, while her few weeks of sales calls represented legitimate productivity. "Cass," David said quietly, "that is not really fair. What is not fair is expecting me to compromise my professional environment for hobby plants. She replied coolly. I am generating significant income for this family. That has to take priority. Over everything? I asked. Over 30 years of work? Over a lifetime of passion and knowledge? Over sentiment? Yes. Sometimes, adults have to make practical choices. The dismissal was complete. My botanical work, my expertise, my love for living things all reduced to mere sentiment that any practical adult would discard without hesitation. I see, I said quietly, setting down my fork. I understand your position perfectly. Something in my tone made everyone look at me more closely. Even Marcus glanced up from his phone to gauge the tension in the room. Mom, we are not dismissing what you have accomplished, David said carefully. We are just trying to balance everyone's needs, are we? Because it seems like we are balancing everyone else's needs against my willingness to sacrifice. And I am wondering what happens when I stop being willing. The question lingered as I excused myself from dinner, leaving behind a table of people who suddenly looked uncertain about assumptions they had taken for granted. In my bedroom, surrounded by my stressed and struggling plants, I realized that Jennifer from the botanical garden had been right about more than proper growing conditions. These plants deserved better than I was providing, and perhaps I deserved better than I was accepting. For the first time in 4 years, I began to seriously consider what my life might look like if I stopped accommodating everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Jennifer Walsh at the extension office and asked if she knew anyone who provided temporary plant boarding services for collections in transition. That is an interesting request, she said. Are you moving? In a way, yes. I need to relocate my plants temporarily while I figure out a permanent solution. She gave me the contact information for a local nursery that specialized in plant care services for collectors who traveled or faced temporary housing changes. Within hours, I had arranged for my most valuable specimens to be professionally maintained while I determined their future. Grandma the sick, where are all your plants going? Marcus asked, finding me carefully wrapping orchids for transport. Somewhere they will be properly cared for, I replied. But you love those plants. I do. That is why I am making sure they get what they need to thrive. He helped me carry plants to the van from the nursery service. His young face troubled by changes he didn't fully understand, but sensed were significant. Are you okay? He asked as we watched the last of my collection being carefully loaded for transport. I looked around my empty back porch, then at my grandson's concerned face. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity rather than confusion. I am going to be, I told him, honestly. That evening, David found me reading in my bedroom, a space that suddenly felt larger without the crowded plants, but somehow emptier too. Mom, Cass told me you moved your plants to a nursery. She is upset. She thinks you are trying to make her feel guilty. I am not trying to make anyone feel anything, I replied calmly. I am simply ensuring my plants receive proper care. But moving them out entirely seems extreme. We could have worked something out. We did work something out, David. We decided that Cassandra's office was more important than my plant's welfare. I accepted that decision and acted accordingly. He shifted uncomfortably. When you put it like that, it sounds accurate. Harsh. Truth often is. We sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in thought. Finally, David spoke again. What do you want, Mom? Really want? The question caught me off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked what I wanted, rather than what I was willing to give up? I want to feel valued in my own home, I said slowly, thinking carefully about my words. I want my opinions to matter when decisions affect me. I want to pursue my interests without having to justify their worth to others. I want to be seen as a person with my own needs and dreams, not just a convenient resource for everyone else's goals. David listened intently, and I could see him processing my words against the reality of our family dynamics over the past 4 years. Have we really made you feel that unwelcome? He asked quietly. Not unwelcome exactly. More like invisible. Like my role is to facilitate everyone else's happiness without regard for my own. That wasn't intentional. Intentions matter less than impacts, David, and the impact has been that I have slowly disappeared in my own home. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. What would have to change for you to feel valued again? I am not sure it is possible, I said honestly. Patterns this established are hard to break. People get comfortable with arrangements that benefit them, even when they are unfair to others. Try me, he said. What would need to change? I looked at my son, seeing glimpses of the fair-minded boy he had once been beneath the conflict, avoidant man he would become. Consultation before decisions that affect my living space or possessions. Equal consideration of my needs alongside everyone else's. And occasionally, just occasionally, someone choosing my side when there is a conflict, instead of automatically assuming I will be the one to compromise. That seems reasonable, does it? Then why hasn't it happened in 4 years? He had no answer for that, because the answer was that it was easier to ask the least powerful person to make all the sacrifices. I was older, alone, and financially stable. I had the most to give and the least power to resist giving it. I will talk to Cass, he promised again. Will you? Or will you explain my feelings to her and ask her to humor me? His wince confirmed my suspicion. David, I love you more than life itself. You are my only child, and these grandchildren are my joy. But I will not continue to live as a second-class citizen in my own home. Something has to change. What are you saying? I am saying that if things cannot improve, if I cannot regain some dignity and autonomy in my own house, then maybe it would be better for everyone if you found your own place. The words hung in the air between us, more shocking to me than to him because I would never seriously considered that option before. But once spoken, they felt true and necessary. Mom, you don't mean that. I do mean it. I have spent 4 years trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, the helpful grandmother, the accommodating hostess. And what has it gotten me? A bedroom full of dying plants and a family who sees me as an obstacle to their success. David stared at me as if I would become a stranger. In a way, I suppose I had. The perpetually yielding woman he had grown accustomed to was asserting needs and boundaries he hadn't seen in years. We don't see you as an obstacle, don't you? When I wanted to keep my sunroom, I was being impractical. When I expressed concern about my plants, I was being sentimental. When I voice any preference that conflicts with Cassandra's, I am being difficult. How is that different from seeing me as an obstacle? He had no answer, because there wasn't one that wouldn't confirm my observation. The following week passed in an atmosphere of careful politeness, as if everyone was walking on eggshells around conversations that might trigger uncomfortable truths. Cassandra continued her office work with visible satisfaction. David spent longer hours away from home, and the children seemed to sense the underlying tension without understanding its source. I used the time to reflect on Jennifer Walsh's visit and the botanical garden opportunity. Without the daily stress of watching my plants deteriorate, I could think more clearly about what I had accomplished over 30 years of careful cultivation and what it meant to me. On Saturday morning, I made another phone call that surprised even me. Ruth, how would you feel about taking a little trip with me? Where to? The botanical garden in Tucson. I want to see their orchid collection. Get some ideas about proper growing environments. When do we leave? That was Ruth, decisive, supportive, ready for adventure even at 74. We had been friends for over 4 decades, and she understood without explanation that this trip represented more than tourism. The drive to Tucson gave us time to talk without interruption, something we rarely managed in Phoenix with its constant demands and distractions. How do you feel about living alone? I asked as we cruised through desert landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. Honest, I love it, Ruth replied without hesitation. After 47 years of marriage, I thought I would be terrified. But there is something liberating about making every decision for yourself. Eating what you want when you want it. watching your own television shows, keeping your own schedule. Don't you get lonely? Sometimes. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonelier in the last years of my marriage than I am now living by myself. Her words resonated deeply. I was surrounded by family, but felt profoundly isolated, cut off from my own preferences and opinions by the constant need to accommodate everyone else's. "Do you think I am being selfish?" I asked, considering asking them to move out. "I think you are finally being realistic about what you need to be happy." The Tucson Botanical Garden was everything I had hoped, a showcase of how plants could thrive when given proper growing conditions and expert care. The orchid house was particularly impressive, with specimens that reminded me of my own collection in its prime. "These growing conditions are perfect," I told Ruth as we admired a display of Phalaenopsis orchids that looked remarkably similar to my anniversary plant. Filtered light, consistent humidity, proper air circulation, like your sunroom used to provide. Exactly like that. We spent hours walking through different themed gardens, each one demonstrating the beauty that resulted from understanding plants' specific needs and providing appropriate environments for growth. "You could do this," Ruth said, as we sat in the garden cafe afterward. "You have the knowledge and experience. Do what? Create your own perfect growing environment. Design a space specifically for your plants where they could thrive. In my house there is no room now. Who says it has to be in your house?" The suggestion was so unexpected that I stared at her in confusion. "Ruth, I cannot afford to rent a greenhouse space." "What if you didn't need to rent? What if you owned it?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a real estate listing she would apparently been researching during our drive south. "It is a small house, 2 bedrooms, with a large sunroom and greenhouse attachment. The owner was a plant collector who is moving to assisted living. It is 15 minutes from your current house, in a nice neighborhood, and the asking price is reasonable." I stared at the photos on her phone screen. The house was modest but charming, with large windows and what appeared to be professionally designed growing spaces. The greenhouse was a dream, climate controlled, with proper benches and staging areas for different types of plants. "Ruth, I cannot buy a house." "Why not? You own your current house free and clear. You could sell it and buy this one outright, with money left over for whatever renovations or improvements you wanted." "But David and his family, what about them? They are adults with jobs and their own resources. If they need housing, they can find their own place like every other family does." The idea was so radical, so completely different from anything I had considered, that I felt lightheaded. Sell my family home and buy something designed specifically for my needs and interests. I couldn't do that to David. Do what? Allow him to take responsibility for his own housing like a grown man? "Violet, he is 45 years old. Most people his age have been managing their own living situations for decades, but the children could visit you whenever they wanted, in a beautiful environment where their grandmother was happy and fulfilled instead of stressed and diminished." We drove home in relative silence, both lost in thought about the possibilities Ruth had presented. The idea of living independently, again, of creating a space designed specifically for my interests and needs, was both thrilling and terrifying. That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months, researching my options online. I looked up the house Ruth had shown me, read about greenhouse design, investigated the local gardening community in that area. For the first time in years, I was planning for my own future rather than simply accommodating everyone else's. The next morning, Cassandra emerged from her office looking frustrated rather than satisfied. "Is everything all right?" I asked, noticing her agitation. "Technical difficulties," she replied tersely. "The internet connection keeps dropping during important calls. I have had to reschedule 2 major presentations. Have you called the service provider?" 3 times. They say the problem is with the house's internal wiring. Apparently the sunroom addition wasn't properly integrated with the original electrical system. I filed this information away without comment, though I couldn't help thinking that my plants had never required reliable internet connectivity to thrive. Maybe you could use a different room temporarily, I suggested. The living room has excellent lighting in the mornings. The living room isn't professional enough for client presentations, she said dismissively. I need a dedicated space with proper setup. Of course she did, just as I had needed a dedicated space for my plants, though apparently that need hadn't warranted the same consideration. That afternoon, Marcus found me reading in the backyard, enjoying the desert air and mountain views that I had been taking for granted. "Grandma the sick, can I ask you something personal?" I set down my book and gave him my full attention. "Always, are you thinking about moving out?" The question surprised me with its directness. "What makes you ask that?" "Jessica said she heard you and Dad talking about changes, and Mom's been acting weird, like she is worried about something." I studied my grandson's earnest face, seeing the intelligence and sensitivity that reminded me so much of Harold. "I am considering my options," I said. "Honestly, I want to make sure I am living in a way that makes me happy and allows me to pursue the things I care about. Like your plants, like my plants, yes. And other interests too. Would you move far away? If I moved at all, it would be somewhere close enough for you and Jessica to visit easily. You are too important to me to lose touch." He nodded thoughtfully. "Good. Because I like having you around, even if the adults act weird sometimes." That evening, David approached me with an expression I recognized from his childhood, the look he wore when he had made a mistake and was trying to figure out how to make amends. "Mom, I have been thinking about our conversation last week." "Which part?" "All of it, but especially what you said about feeling invisible in your own home." I waited for him to continue, not wanting to make it easier by filling the silence. "I think you are right. I think we have been taking your accommodations for granted, expecting you to be the one who always compromises." It was a start, though I wondered if this recognition would lead to actual changes or just to better intentions. "What made you realize that?" I asked. "Jessica, actually. She asked me when was the last time I would stood up for you the way you always stood up for me growing up. I couldn't think of a single example. And how did that make you feel?" "Ashamed." "You deserved better from me, Mom. You deserved a son who protected you the way you always protected me." His admission touched me deeply, though I remained cautious about assuming it would translate into different behavior. "What happens now?" I asked. "I talked to Cass. Really talk to her. Not just explain your concerns, but make it clear that changes need to happen." "And if she is not willing to make changes?" David was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications of my question. "Then we figure out an alternative arrangement." It wasn't a strong commitment, but it was more than I had heard from him in years. Perhaps there was still hope for finding balance within our family structure. 2 days later, that hope was tested when Cassandra requested another family meeting. "I have been doing some research," she announced as we gathered in the living room, "about internet reliability issues and home office setups." I braced myself for whatever solution she had devised that would likely involve more sacrifices from me. It turns out that converting garages to office spaces is quite common and often more cost-effective than trying to retrofit existing rooms. I looked toward the garage, which currently housed David's workshop tools and equipment alongside typical household storage. "The garage," David looked confused, "but that is where I keep my woodworking supplies." "You never use them anymore," Cassandra replied, dismissively. "They are just collecting dust. We could clean it out, add proper lighting and climate control, and create a professional office space that wouldn't interfere with anyone else's use of the house." "I do use those tools," David protested. "Maybe not recently, but I am planning to start a project soon." "What project?" she challenged. He couldn't answer immediately because, like me, he had been slowly giving up the things he loved to make room for her priorities. "Converting the garage would be expensive," I pointed out. "Electrical work, insulation, flooring, climate control, that is a major renovation. It is an investment in our future earning potential," Cassandra replied smoothly. "Besides, it would solve everyone's problems. I would have a dedicated office, Violet could have her sunroom back for plants, and David could keep his tools." On the surface, it seemed like a reasonable compromise. Everyone got what they wanted, and the family harmony would be restored, but I found myself analyzing the underlying dynamics, rather than just the proposed solution. "Who pays for this renovation?" I asked. "We all benefit, so we should all contribute," Cassandra replied. "I am sure we can work out a fair cost-sharing arrangement." There it was. Another situation where I would be expected to pay for changes that primarily benefited others, justified by the argument that technical family harmony served everyone's interests. "How much are we talking about?" David asked. "I have gotten some preliminary estimates. With proper insulation, electrical upgrades, flooring, and climate control, we are looking at around $15,000. $15,000. A substantial sum, especially for a renovation that would primarily serve Cassandra's professional needs while allowing everyone else to maintain their current arrangements." "That is a lot of money," David said slowly. "It is an investment," Cassandra repeated. "In my career, in our family's future, and in keeping the household running smoothly." I recognized the sales technique, framing personal benefits as family benefits, to make the expense seem more reasonable, and the sacrifice more justified. "I need to think about it," I said. "What is to think about?" Cassandra's voice carried a hint of impatience. "It solves everyone's problems. Does it? Or does it solve your problems while creating new financial obligations for others?" The question hung in the air, and I could see David beginning to recognize the pattern I was highlighting. "Mom, it would solve your plant problem too," he said uncertainly. "My plants aren't a problem, David. They are living things that deserve proper care. The problem is the assumption that my interests should always be the first ones sacrificed when someone else has different priorities." That night, I lay awake thinking about the garage conversion proposal and what it represented. On one level, it seemed generous. Cassandra was willing to give up her perfect sunroom office to restore my growing space. But on another level, it was just another variation of the same dynamic that had characterized our living arrangement for 4 years. I would pay for renovations that primarily served her needs. She would get a dedicated, professional office space designed to her specifications. I would get my plants back in their original location, as if I should be grateful to regain what had been taken from me in the first place. The next morning, I made a phone call that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. "Jennifer, this is Violet Santos. I wanted to ask about that botanical garden exhibit opportunity." "Mrs. Santos, I am so glad you called. How are your plants doing?" "They are being professionally maintained while I make some living arrangement decisions, but I wanted to know if the exhibit opportunity is still available." "Absolutely. We would be thrilled to include your specimens. There is something else. I have been thinking about your comment that plants of this caliber deserve proper growing conditions. You were right, and I am taking steps to ensure they get what they need." "That is wonderful to hear." I took a deep breath before continuing. "I am also wondering if there might be volunteer opportunities at the botanical garden. I have significant experience in orchid cultivation and propagation, and I would love to share that knowledge with others." "Mrs. Santos, that is exactly what we need. We are always looking for experienced volunteers to help with our educational programs. Could you come in for an interview next week?" As we scheduled the meeting, I felt a familiar excitement that had been missing from my life for too long. The prospect of being valued for my expertise, of contributing to something meaningful in the botanical community, of spending time with people who shared my passion for plant life. After we hung up, I sat in my empty sunroom looking at the mountain view that had anchored my mornings for 3 decades. The space looked sterile and lifeless without my plants, despite Cassandra's professional decorating efforts. "Grandma Visi," Jessica's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Come in, sweetie." She entered hesitantly, as if sensing that something significant was shifting in our family dynamics. "Mom and Dad have been having a lot of quiet conversations lately, about money and the garage and stuff." "Are we in trouble?" "What kind of trouble do you mean?" "Financial trouble, like, do we need to move out?" I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing genuine concern mixed with something that might have been hope. Would that be terrible? I asked. If you had to move to your own place? Jessica considered the question seriously. I don't know. It might be nice to have our own space again, where I could play music without worrying about disturbing your afternoon rest. And Marcus could have friends over without checking if it is okay with everyone. Her answer revealed something I hadn't fully considered, that our current living arrangement might be constraining for the children too, forcing them to navigate multiple adult authorities and competing preferences in their daily lives. What about Mom and Dad? Do they seem happy living here? Mom seems stressed a lot, trying to balance work and family and keeping everyone happy. Dad seems, I don't know, tired, maybe, like he is always trying to avoid conflict instead of dealing with problems. Her observations were remarkably perceptive for an 18-year-old, and they confirmed what I had been sensing about the toll our living arrangement was taking on everyone. Not just me. Jessica, can I ask you something honestly? Do you think this family would be healthier if your parents had their own place and you came to visit me regularly, instead of all living together? She was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking carefully about her response. Maybe, she said finally, it might be better for everyone to have their own space, and then choose to spend time together because we want to, not because we have to. That afternoon, I called Ruth and asked if she could drive me to see the house with the greenhouse that she had shown me pictures of in Tucson. Ready to take control of your life? She asked. Ready to explore the possibilities. The house was even better in person than in photographs. Smaller than my current home, but efficiently designed, with large windows that maximized natural light, and a greenhouse attachment that took my breath away. The current owner, Mrs. Chen, was a woman in her 80s who had been forced to move to assisted living due to health issues. I hate to give up my plants, she told us as she showed us through her magnificent collection. But I cannot maintain them anymore, and I want them to go to someone who understands their value. The greenhouse was a plant lover's dream, climate controlled, with proper ventilation systems, staging areas for different types of specimens, and even a potting bench area for propagation work. Mrs. Chen's collection included several varieties I would never successfully grown, and she was eager to share cultivation techniques and even leave some plants for the right buyer. The asking price includes the greenhouse setup and most of the mature plants, she explained. I would rather see them cared for than try to move them. Walking through that space, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, of vision of my own future that excited rather than diminished me. I could see my orchids thriving in proper conditions, could imagine expanding my collection to include new varieties, could picture myself volunteering at the botanical garden during the day and coming home to my own plant sanctuary in the evening. What do you think? Ruth asked as we drove home. I think it is perfect. I think it is exactly what I need. But it would mean selling the family home. It would mean forcing David and his family to find their own place. It would mean admitting that our living arrangement isn't working and taking action to change it, all of which sound like positive developments to me. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. I called a real estate agent to get a market assessment of my current house and to discuss the logistics of making an offer on Mrs. Chen's property. The agent, a professional woman named Sarah Mitchell, arrived the next morning to walk through my house and assess its value. This is a lovely home, she said as we toured the rooms. The location is excellent, and the layout is very family-friendly. In the current market, I would estimate the value at around $400,000. More than enough to buy Mrs. Chen's house outright and have substantial funds left over for travel, hobbies, or any other interests I might want to pursue in my retirement years. How quickly could a sale be completed? I asked. With the right buyer, we could close in 30 to 45 days, and the buying process for another property? If you are paying cash, that could happen even faster. Are you looking to downsize? In a way, yes. I am looking to right-size to create a living situation that matches my current needs and interests. That evening, I requested another family meeting. This time, I had a specific agenda and a clear sense of what I wanted to communicate. I have made some decisions about my living situation. I announced as everyone gathered in the living room. David and Cassandra exchanged glances, clearly sensing that something significant was coming. I have decided to sell this house and buy a smaller place that is better suited to my needs. The silence that followed was profound. Even Marcus looked up from his phone, recognizing the importance of what I had just said. "Mom, what are you talking about?" David finally asked. "I am talking about recognizing that our current living arrangement isn't working for anyone. You and Cassandra need your own space to build your careers and raise your children without having to accommodate an elderly relative. And I need a living situation where I feel valued and autonomous rather than like a burden." "You are not a burden," Jessica said quickly. "Thank you, sweetheart. But the dynamics of our household suggest otherwise. Too many decisions get made based on what is convenient for others rather than what is fair to everyone." "But this is the family home," David protested. "This is where I grew up, where the kids have lived for 4 years. You cannot just sell it." "I can, actually. It is my property, and I have the right to make decisions about how and where I live." Cassandra leaned forward, her business instincts clearly engaged. "Where would you go? Have you thought this through financially?" "I have found a house that is perfect for my needs. Smaller, more manageable, with specialized space for my plant collection. I can afford it without taking on debt, and you will have 45 days to find your own place." 45 days? David looked panicked. "Mom, we cannot find a house and move in 45 days. You can rent temporarily while you house hunt. Lots of families do it. But why? What brought this on so suddenly?" I looked around the room at these people I loved, seeing genuine confusion on their faces. They truly didn't understand how the past 4 years had affected me, how steadily my sense of self-worth and autonomy had eroded under the weight of constant accommodation. "David, when was the last time someone in this family asked what I wanted before making a decision that affected me?" He couldn't answer. "When was the last time my preferences carried the same weight as everyone else's, when we were deciding anything, what to have for dinner, what to watch on television, how to use the space in my own home?" Still no answer. When was the last time someone chose my side in a conflict, instead of automatically assuming I would be the one to compromise? The questions highlighted a pattern. None of them had consciously recognized, but all of them had participated in. "We didn't mean to make you feel unimportant," Cassandra said, though her tone suggested she was more concerned about the practical implications of my decision than the emotional factors behind it. "Intentions matter less than impacts," I replied, echoing what I had told David weeks earlier. "And the impact has been that I have become a secondary character in my own life." "So you are punishing us by kicking us out?" Cassandra's voice carried an edge of resentment. "I am not punishing anyone. I am making a choice to prioritize my own well-being for the first time in 4 years. You are all adults with jobs and resources. You will be fine." "What about the kids?" David asked. "They will have to change schools, leave their friends. They are welcome to visit me any time. My new place will have plenty of room for overnight visits and holidays. The difference is that those visits will be by choice rather than obligation, which might make them more meaningful for everyone." Marcus spoke up for the first time. "Grandma the sick. Would you be happier living by yourself?" "I think so, sweetheart. I think I would be happier having my own space where I can make my own decisions. And you all might be happier not having to navigate another adult's preferences in your daily lives." "When would this happen?" Jessica asked. "I am making an offer on the new house tomorrow. If it is accepted, I will list this house immediately. You will have plenty of time to find somewhere that works for your family." The room fell quiet as everyone processed what I had said. I could see different emotions playing across their faces: surprise, concern, resentment, and perhaps, in some cases, a hint of relief. "I need some air," David said, standing abruptly and heading for the back porch. Cassandra followed him, and I could hear the beginning of an intense whispered conversation through the sliding door. Grandma the sick Jessica came over and sat beside me. "Are you sure about this?" "I am sure it is time for a change. Whether this specific change is right, I guess we will find out. I will miss living with you, and I will miss living with you too. But maybe we will appreciate each other more when our time together is by choice rather than circumstance. That night, I lay awake, listening to David and Cassandra's muffled arguments through the bedroom walls. I caught fragments of their conversation, concerns about money, logistics, blame for the situation, and strategizing about how to change my mind. But for the first time in years, their stress wasn't my responsibility to manage or resolve. I had made a decision based on my own needs and well-being, and whatever challenges it created for others were theirs to navigate. The next morning, I called Sarah Mitchell and made an offer on Mrs. Chen's house. It was accepted within hours. "Congratulations," Sarah said. "You are going to love having your own space again." My own space. After 4 years of sharing everything and accommodating everyone else's preferences, the concept felt both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. That afternoon, the for sale sign went up in my front yard. Neighbors began stopping by to ask questions, and I found myself explaining my decision dozens of times to people who seemed genuinely surprised that I would choose to live independently rather than with family. "But will not you be lonely?" was the most common question. I might be, I answered, honestly. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Right now, I am lonely in a house full of people. Maybe living alone will actually reduce that feeling. The first showing was scheduled for the weekend, and suddenly the reality of what I was doing became concrete for everyone in the family. David walked through the house as if seeing it for the first time, pointing out details to the potential buyers with a mixture of pride and sadness. "My father built those kitchen cabinets himself," he told a young couple who were interested in the family-friendly layout. "And that sunroom addition, my parents designed that specifically for my mother's plant collection." I watched him marketing features of the house that he had taken for granted for years, suddenly seeing value in things that had become invisible through familiarity. After the buyers left, David found me in the backyard. "Mom, seeing you show the house to strangers made this feel real in a way it hadn't before." "It is real, David. Are you sure you want to do this? We could work things out, make changes, find compromises that work better for everyone." I studied my son's face, seeing genuine distress, but also recognizing the same pattern that had characterized our conflicts for 4 years, the assumption that I could be convinced to change my mind if he just found the right arguments. "What changes would you make?" I asked. "Well, we could go ahead with the garage conversion so you could have your sunroom back, and we could establish better boundaries about decision-making. Make sure your opinions are heard before we change things." "Who would pay for the garage conversion?" "We would figure out a fair cost-sharing arrangement, which would primarily benefit Cassandra's career while solving problems that were created by her taking over my space in the first place." He couldn't argue with that logic. "David, I appreciate that you are willing to consider changes now, but these same issues have existed for 4 years, and they have only become urgent now that I am taking action to solve them myself." "So you don't think we can change?" "I think people change when they have to, not when they are asked to. As long as I am willing to absorb all the inconvenience and accommodation, there is no real incentive for anyone else to modify their behavior." That sounds pretty cynical. It sounds pretty realistic, and I am tired of being the only one who makes sacrifices for the sake of family harmony. That weekend brought 3 more showings and 2 serious offers. The house was going to sell quickly, which meant David and Cassandra needed to accelerate their housing search. I found Cassandra on Sunday morning, hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, scrolling through rental listings with visible frustration. "Finding anything promising?" I asked. "Everything's either too expensive or too small, or in bad neighborhoods," she replied without looking up. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to rent a 4-bedroom house in a decent area?" I did have some idea, which was part of why I understood their resistance to moving out. Living rent-free in my house had allowed them to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford on their current income. "It is challenging," I agreed, "but families manage it every day." Families that haven't gotten used to living in a beautiful house without paying market-rate housing costs, she said with obvious resentment. Cassandra, I want you to understand something. I didn't ask you to move in with me 4 years ago to take advantage of me financially. I offered temporary help during a difficult period, and it evolved into a permanent arrangement that wasn't healthy for anyone. It was healthy enough until you decided to disrupt everything. Was it? Were you happy having to navigate my preferences and opinions in your daily life? Were David and the kids happy living with the constant undercurrent of tension and competing priorities? She was quiet for a moment, clearly considering her honest answer rather than her defensive response. It had its challenges, she admitted finally, for everyone. Which is why this change will ultimately benefit all of us. Easy for you to say. You are not the one who has to figure out how to afford market-rate housing while maintaining the same quality of life. No, I am not. I am the one who has to figure out how to rebuild a sense of autonomy and dignity after 4 years of feeling like a guest in my own home. She looked up at me then, perhaps hearing something in my voice that made her recognize the seriousness of what I was saying. I didn't know you felt that way. I tried to hide it, for the sake of family harmony. But hiding my feelings didn't make them go away. It just made me disappear a little bit more each day. Violet, I never intended, I know you didn't, but impact matters more than intention. And the impact was that I stopped feeling like a person with my own needs and desires. We sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in thought about how we had arrived at this point, and what might have been different. What happens now? She asked. You find a place that works for your family. I move to my new house, and we all figure out how to be related to each other in healthier ways. Do you think we can? I hope so, but it will require everyone to make different choices than we have made for the past 4 years. The closing on Mrs. Chen's house was scheduled for 3 weeks after my house sale was finalized. That gave me time to pack my belongings and prepare for a major life transition. At 71 years old, I started with my bedroom, carefully wrapping the photographs and mementos that told the story of my life with Harold and my years as a mother and grandmother. Each item required a decision: what to keep, what to donate, what to give to family members who might treasure it. Grandma was sick. Can I help you pack? Marcus asked one afternoon, finding me surrounded by boxes and bubble wrap. Of course, sweetheart. He picked up a framed photograph of Harold and me at David's college graduation, studying it with interest. I don't remember Grandpa very well, he said, but in all the pictures, you both look really happy. We were happy. We had our challenges, like every couple, but we respected each other and made decisions together. Is that what you are looking for now? Someone to make decisions with? Not someone to make decisions with. Exactly. I am looking to make my own decisions again, to feel like the choices I make about my own life matter. He nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. As we packed, Marcus told me about his own plans for the future college applications, career interests, relationships with friends and family. I realized how little I had known about his inner life while we were all focused on managing the logistics of shared living. Will you visit me in my new house? I asked. Of course. Can I bring friends sometimes? Absolutely. I would love to meet your friends and show them the greenhouse. It will be cool having a grandma with her own greenhouse. Most people don't get to see plants like that up close. His enthusiasm reminded me that my interests and expertise had value beyond my immediate family circle, that there was a whole world of people who might appreciate what I had spent decades learning and perfecting. Jessica helped me sort through my wardrobe, identifying clothes that still fit my lifestyle and others that belonged to an earlier version of myself. Grandma was sick. You should keep this, she said, holding up a bright blue sundress I hadn't worn in years. It is beautiful, and it matches your eyes. I had forgotten about the dress, forgotten that I used to choose clothes for beauty and personal expression rather than just practicality and invisibility. You think I should wear more color? I think you should wear whatever makes you feel good about yourself. Such simple wisdom from an 18-year-old. Yet it highlighted how much I had forgotten about choosing things based on my own preferences, rather than what seemed appropriate or unobtrusive. David spent most of the packing period in a state of subdued melancholy, helping when asked but clearly struggling with the magnitude of the changes happening to his family. "Mom, I keep thinking there must be something I could have done differently," he said one evening as we packed books in the living room. "Like what?" "Been more aware of how you were feeling, stood up to Cass more when she was being unreasonable. Paid more attention to the patterns Ruth was trying to point out." "You could have done those things," I agreed, "but you made the choices that seemed easiest at the time. Just like I made the choice to accommodate rather than confront. Do you think it is too late to have a better relationship? I mean, David, you will always be my son, and I will always love you. But our relationship will have to be built on different terms, going forward terms, that include mutual respect and recognition of each other as autonomous adults. I can live with that, can you? It means you cannot expect me to automatically prioritize your needs over my own anymore. It means sometimes I will make decisions you don't like or agree with. It means treating me like a person with my own valid opinions rather than a resource to be managed." He nodded slowly. "It means treating you the way I should have been treating you all along." 2 weeks before my moving date, I got a call from Jennifer Walsh at the Botanical Garden. "Mrs. Santos, I have exciting news. The orchid exhibit has been approved, and we would love to feature several of your specimens as centerpieces." "That is wonderful. When would you need them?" "The exhibit opens in 2 months. Could you bring them in a month early so we can assess their condition and prepare them for display?" "Actually, they will be in perfect condition by then. I am moving to a house with a professional greenhouse, and they will have several weeks to recover from their temporary boarding and adjust to optimal growing conditions." "Even better. And I wanted to mention we have had several inquiries about orchid cultivation classes. Would you be interested in teaching a workshop series?" Teaching, sharing my knowledge and expertise with people who wanted to learn. The idea filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. "I would love that," I said without hesitation. After we hung up, I sat in my nearly empty bedroom imagining myself as a teacher, sharing techniques I had developed over 30 years with students who valued and appreciated botanical knowledge. For the first time since Harold's death, I had professional goals and opportunities that excited me. Moving day arrived with characteristic Arizona sunshine and unseasonably cool temperatures. The moving company efficiently loaded decades of belongings into their truck while I walked through the empty rooms, one last time. Each room held memories Harold and me painting walls as newlyweds, David taking his first steps in the hallway, family celebrations and quiet evenings, and ordinary moments that had made up the fabric of our life together. But I felt no regret about leaving. The house had served its purpose in my life, had been the setting for love and growth and family building. Now it would serve that purpose for a new family while I created a different kind of life in a space designed for the person I was becoming rather than the person I had been. David, Jessica, and Marcus came to help me settle into the new house, carrying boxes and furniture and trying to envision how I would arrange my life in this smaller, brighter space. The greenhouse was everything I had hoped and more. Mrs. Chen had left detailed care instructions for the plants she was gifting to me, along with cultivation notes accumulated over decades of expert growing. Combined with my own collection, which I retrieved from the boarding nursery that afternoon, I would have one of the most diverse and impressive home orchid collections in the region. "Grandma Visai, this is amazing," Jessica breathed, standing among the staged plants and professional growing equipment. "It is like a botanical wonderland. Wait until you see it in 6 months. When everything's established and blooming," I said, already envisioning the space filled with healthy, thriving plants. That evening, after everyone had gone home to their own places, David and Cassandra had found a rental house across town, smaller than my old house but adequate for their family's needs. I sat in my new living room, looking out at the desert landscape through large windows that framed the view like artwork. The silence was profound, after years of background noise from other people's activities and conversations. But it wasn't lonely silence. It was peaceful silence. The kind that invited reflection and allowed for personal thoughts without constant interruption. I made myself a simple dinner, choosing foods based entirely on my own preferences, and ate while reading a book about advanced orchid propagation techniques. After dinner, I walked through my greenhouse, checking on plants and planning improvements and additions. For the first time in years, I went to bed feeling excited about the following day, rather than resigned to more accommodation and compromise. The next morning, I woke naturally at sunrise, made coffee using whatever creamer I wanted, and sat in my greenhouse with my first cup, surrounded by the green life I had spent decades cultivating and learning to understand. My phone rang, displaying Jessica's number. "Good morning, sweetheart. Good morning, Grandma V. I wanted to check how your first night went. It was perfect, quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. Do you miss us?" "I miss you terribly. But missing you feels different when I know I will see you by choice rather than by circumstance. When are you coming for your first official visit? How about this weekend? I could help you organize the greenhouse, and you could teach me about the new plants." "I would love that." After we hung up, I smiled as I sipped my coffee and watched the morning light change the colors in my plant collection. This was what I had been seeking without fully realizing it: the freedom to miss my family from a place of strength rather than need, to look forward to their visits as gifts rather than obligations. Ruth called an hour later. "How does it feel to be a homeowner again, instead of a hostess?" "Like I remember who I am," I said honestly. "And who is that?" I looked around my greenhouse, then out at the mountain views that were mine to enjoy without negotiation or compromise. "Someone who knows her own worth," I said. "Someone who has valuable knowledge to share and beautiful things to create. Someone who deserves respect and autonomy, and the chance to make her own choices about how to spend her days." "Took you long enough to remember," Ruth said with satisfaction. "Better late than never." That afternoon, I called the botanical garden to confirm my volunteer schedule and discussed plans for the orchid exhibit and educational workshops. Then I called a local gardening club to inquire about membership and presentation opportunities. For the first time in years, I was building a schedule based on my interests and expertise, rather than other people's needs and expectations. I was creating a life that reflected my values and priorities, rather than accommodating everyone else's. As the sun set over the Superstition Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and coral, I stood in my greenhouse among the plants I had saved, and the new ones I was learning to understand. They were thriving in their proper environment, recovering from the stress of inappropriate conditions and beginning to show signs of new growth and vitality. Just like me, I picked up my phone and scrolled through photos from the day, images of my organized greenhouse, my cozy living room, my kitchen set up exactly as I preferred it. Without hesitation, I posted several pictures to social media with a caption I never could have written while living under someone else's roof. At 71, I am learning that it is never too late to choose yourself. My new home, my greenhouse, my independent life, proof that dignity and autonomy don't have expiration dates. Here is to everyone who has the courage to put their own well-being first, regardless of what others expect or demand. Within minutes, comments began appearing from friends, neighbors, and acquaintances who had watched my situation over the past 4 years. Many expressed admiration for my courage. Others shared their own stories of reclaiming independence later in life, and several asked for tours of my greenhouse and gardening advice. I had become visible again, not as someone's mother or grandmother or hostess, but as Violet Santos, expert gardener, teacher, and woman who had chosen dignity over accommodation. As I prepared for bed in my own house, surrounded by my own things arranged according to my own preferences, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with my choices and excitement about my future. Tomorrow, I would continue setting up my greenhouse, planning my teaching workshops, and building a life that honored both my past accomplishments and my future potential. I would be someone who mattered, whose opinions carried weight, whose expertise was valued and sought after. I would be myself, fully and without apology, for the first time in far too long. And that, I realized as I drifted off to sleep in my own bed in my own house, was the most valuable thing I could have given myself at any age. What lessons have you learned about standing up for yourself in family situations? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and maintaining your dignity? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, family dynamics, and finding your voice when it matters most.